Hi everyone. In this video, we're going to look at week 6 and a little bit even into week 7 more specifically, and we'll look more closely at the first two assignments in the Discourse Community Report. That those assignments being this pre-writing activity, and then our updated annotated bibliography and primary research report, which comes in week 7. So, week 5 and 6 have been really concept and reading heavy. Last week we looked at G's really influential idea about discourse with a capital D, primary, secondary, dominant, non-dominant discourse. In the John's reading, we really looked at what it means to be a member or to have authority in a discourse community and how that affects our identity, right? We call that enculturation. And if you did do the Bartholomew reading, we got a similar look at that. And I think that one's particularly compelling for undergraduates because it really does present how difficult it is as an undergrad to go from a sociology classroom and be expected to know the discourse of sociology, take that, and then your class ends and you go to your geology classroom and you're expected to be able to walk and talk that discourse as well. Of course, these 3 readings, or even one of these readings, these are all really excellent ways to begin thinking about your Discourse Community Report project. If one of these readings really resonated with you, or if you were reading John's and you thought, this is really similar, I can take this idea about what it means to be a functioning member and I can apply it to my discourse community, great, right? That's a great step. The first step we really want to make is kind of what concept, what framework, what element of writing or literacy or rhetoric do we want to focus on in our discourse community. We're continuing that work in week 6 as well. We will read Class, who really does a cool, in-depth analysis of Alexis. Wardle and Downs and Dirk are going to really help us understand genre theory, which is another concept we could use to analyze how our discourse community uses writing. So focusing on lexis and genre in discourse communities this week is going to, again, give us more ideas, more foundational concepts that we could use and as a framework to analyze our discourse community. Looking at the assignments, we have, although this week is somewhat reading heavy, we of course have our discussion boards. Although it's reading heavy, we do just have a sort of brief pre-writing activity to kick off the Discourse Community Report due on Sunday. And then Wednesday is next week. As soon as Wednesday, we are going to compile some research on our discourse community trajectory, and we're asked to have conducted primary research. So remember way back whenever we came up with a primary research plan, I said it's important to start thinking about this now because we'll need to produce some primary research in week 7. Well, that's quickly approaching. So we'll look at both of those assignments in more detail, but just know we need to have done primary research by Wednesday of week 7. We're reading Driscoll for Sunday. Driscoll is going to be our Bible for conducting primary research. For many of us, this might be our first foray into primary research, and that's okay. Driscoll really helps us understand what it is, how to start. He takes us everywhere from planning primary research all the way to conducting, collecting, and analyzing primary research. So Driscoll is going to be a really helpful resource for us, and maybe one that you want to read and understand before Sunday. in our week 6 discussion board, the second contribution, instead of doing replies this week, we're actually going to design either a survey or an interview or an analytical framework that we can use to elicit primary research. So if you have someone in mind that you want to interview, I really recommend doing Driscoll early and finishing our discussion board post early, because then you'll be able to distribute that survey, or you'll be able to distribute that interview and allow time for those results to come back before Wednesday when our primary research report is due. Okay, so this week's assignment, writing rhetoric and language literacy in our discourse community pre-writing exercise, very similar to how we started the entering the conversation argument. It's a series of questions designed to get you thinking, designed to almost get you brainstorming about where this project, what direction this project will go, what our research question will be, what secondary and primary research might we use to examine and support that research question, and ultimately support a compelling thesis. So no real surprises here. We're going through the same writing process we already went through. So readings like how can we create a compelling thesis are going to be helpful here if we review them. I've also included a link to some good research questions from previous projects. Excuse me, that was not the cleanest transition, but right, if you're asking what it looks like to ask specific research questions about your genre, or excuse me, about a genre in your discourse community, here are some really great models for you. And again, here is that sort of heuristic, those suggestions, guidelines, and sources that I've designed to really help provide you with models and sources you might need, all the way from, brainstorming your research question to looking at student samples to finding sources that are really authoritative on, say, genre or on, say, Lexis. So if you haven't looked at this guideline, which I included in the discourse community report assignment more generally, I really think this is where the work on your project should start. Reading and brainstorming a little bit based on concepts or based on the readings you find the most interesting. We're going to go beyond week 6, a little bit into week 7, when our primary research report and our annotated bibliography are due. We already did an annotated bibliography, looking for secondary sources in our previous project. This is similar, but the first step here is to write a short paragraph, sort of revising the question perhaps we posed last week. Really, I just want you to try to explain to yourself and to me a more developed idea of what specific element of writing and rhetoric and or literacy. I really want to know what you think you'll be focusing on here. Step 2, it's an annotated bibliography of secondary sources. Similar to what we've done previously, I'm asking you to find 3 really good sources that will help you, either in your introduction, in which you say, well, here's what G and Johns have said about discourse, or they'll help you support the claims you're going to make. So as in our last annotated bibliography, I'm asking for a citation and an annotation, right? Just a paragraph or 2 in which you answer the following questions. These questions are different from last time. They're a little bit more specifically designed to help us in this project more generally, but at the heart of it, find 3 really helpful sources, even if they're sources from this class, even if they're sources I've provided in that guideline. And I want you to tell me what information in them is helpful. How do you think you're going to right? What matters to you here, right? That G article is huge. Maybe you just want to focus on G's idea of identity kit and you're not so interested in primary discourse or whatever, right? So what specific part of the source is important to you? And I'm going to ask you a tough question. How are you going to use this information to make our argument? And as always, we really want to know how our sources relate to our other sources. So what's going on in this conversation? Who does G agree with? Who does he disagree with? Where does, how has John's built on G's ideas? Something like that. And step 3 is the primary research report. This is just, I want you to collect, to amass the results of your primary research. So if you conducted an interview or multiple interviews, right, this is where you would include the transcript of your interviews. It should have, right, the questions you asked and the responses you got. Or if you did a survey, this is where, I want to see the survey questions you asked. I want to see the data, all of the answers or the percentages on the Likert scale or whatever, however you designed your survey. This is where we collect the primary data. Then in a paragraph, we're just going to start thinking about, we really don't have to come up with any answers, but I'm going to ask you in just a paragraph to answer the question, what do the results suggest? Or in other words, what do you think, maybe based on the data you've received, what are the findings going to be? So again, Driscoll here is going to be our Bible. That reading really, especially for those of us who are doing primary research for the first time, that reading should be helpful from beginning to end, from designing a survey to beginning to unpack the results, from conducting an observation to collecting and making sense of your observations. So in week 6 and on into week 7, things are moving quickly. We have, of course, our first assignment, the pre-writing activity, due at the end of week 6. Then in the middle of week 7, we're asked, we need to have some research. Yeah, what sources are we going to use to build our argument? And what does our primary research find? What does that suggest for the answer to our good research question? And by the end of week 7, we are asked to have a draft of our discourse community report. So this is all to say, I think the sooner we can get our primary research going, the sooner we can read Driscoll and design our survey or design our observation or design our interview and get that out. Primary research takes time because it depends on other schedules. So I really suggest we do this reading and get this week 6 discussion board contribution done so that we can get that primary research back on time and then work to put it together into a draft by the end of week 7. As always, questions are welcome via email. Come see me in my Zoom office hours or in the Ask Questions Here public discussion board forum. Great. I hope you're as excited about this project as I am. It might seem like a lot, but remember, at its heart, we're just looking at some way that our real-world discourse communities, which we've chosen because we're interested in them, we get to look at them more deeply and ask, how exactly is language or writing at working here? Maybe I'm a nerd, but it sounds fun to me, and it is fun to me. Okay, good luck. Talk to you soon.